This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. Find Your Dream Job is brought to you by Top Resume. Top Resumes help more than 400,000 professionals land more interviews and get hired faster. Get a free review of your resume today. Go to maxlist.org/topresume. You've received a job offer. Congratulations. Now it's time to talk about money. Crystal Granger is here to share tips and tricks for responding to a salary offer. She's the Total Rewards and Equity Manager at Bob's Red Mill. It's an employee-owned company that makes natural, certified organic, and gluten-free milled grain products. Crystal joins us from Portland, Oregon. Well, Crystal, let's jump right into it. Why shouldn't you accept the first salary figure that an employer proposes?
Great question, Mac. I think that I wouldn't say that it's not okay to not accept the first salary offer that someone proposes, but I do think that you should reflect on that salary before you accept it. I always recommend taking, 24 to 72 hours to sit with the salary offer and really kind of analyze what you need to live within your means. If it's a promotion within your current company or a new job elsewhere, it's always best to reflect on what you need to live within your means prior to accepting that offer. Prior to interviewing for a position, I would encourage people to ask or review that salary range that would be offered. So if what they're hoping to earn fits inside that range, it's wonderful, right? And they can continue to move forward, but it's a waste of time if what they want to earn is less, unless they have other strategies to kind of up that compensation.
So have a range in mind before you apply for a job and make sure, if you can, that the employer is offering that range. Sometimes, as you know, Crystal, employers don't post salary ranges, and you might not discover the figure until well along in the hiring process. Once that number's on the table, if it doesn't match your target figure, do employers expect you to negotiate?
Absolutely. Yeah. Negotiation is definitely expected, and I recommend it, even if you are offered a salary that you're happy with. I think that for women in the workplace, being confident in what you're asking for is really important. After doing some research, I came across an NPR report recently that was, hosted on Equal Pay Day, which this year happened to be March 14th. And statistics still indicate that women make 82 cents on the dollar compared to men, and even less for women of color. So on March 14th, the reason it was celebrated on that day this year was because of how far into the year women have to work to catch up to what their male colleagues earned in the previous year.
You're an HR professional, Crystal. In your experience, do you see a gender difference between how men and women approach salary negotiation?
Absolutely. I think that men, in our society are taught to have that confidence and to ask for more money naturally. And women, we have to be persuaded to ask for the money that we deserve. And so how do we mend that gap? How do we negotiate for higher salaries? And like you said, pay equity laws are not equal across the country yet. And so employers or employees looking for work have a hard time kind of figuring out what that salary range is, sometimes far along into the interview process. But with that in mind, when the opportunity does present itself to ask for a higher number, there's a few tips that I'd like to offer about how you can go ahead and do that confidently.
Well, let's talk about those tips. Why don't you take it? I know one of the suggestions that you make is to do an analysis of what you need to survive financially. Tell us more about this, Crystal, and why is it important?
I think that the number that a salary is offered is great, but you could actually be taking a pay cut depending on how much you might have to pay towards your benefits or your health insurance. So if you can really do an analysis of what you need to live within your means prior to accepting that, sometimes you can find wiggle room in that number. For example, if an employer decides to match your 401k contributions and the salary is a touch lower, in the long run, that actually will help you more than having a slightly higher salary, but no 401k contribution match.
What elements do you recommend candidates consider when doing that analysis, Crystal? You mentioned salary, of course, and then 401k. What other parts of a compensation package should candidates think about?
Well, I think the largest component that employers are contributing right now outside of your base salary is going to be your health insurance. So usually there's an employee and an employer contribution. And I always recommend people to look and see what the employer is contributing compared to what you would be contributing per paycheck, because that number could be significant. Outside of like health insurance, there's extras. Like, does your employee contribute to a dependent care account? Does it contribute to a health savings account? Does it have a 401k match? All of those things that are a part of the total compensation package you should really hone in on them during the negotiation phase. And things like paid time off. What is the accrual rate for your first year compared to your fifth year? And what does that paid time off equivalent to in dollars?
It's a lot of moving parts. How do you recommend putting it all together? And is it important to Crystal to add a dollar value to each of these elements?
I like to recommend, when you ask how to put it all together, starting with what you value. So if you are, a post-COVID millennial, you might value working from home. You might value, a better work-life balance. So all of those things you should consider and rank as you look at your overall compensation package. So for example, if you're someone who likes to have more free time to do what you like in your personal time, maybe taking a lesser salary, but a higher accrual rate on your vacation is worth it, because those vacation hours turn into dollars eventually. You should be able to always get the analysis for your employer and employee contributions towards your health insurance. And all of those dollars should be counted towards your compensation. Like I said, at some companies, you might have a higher salary range, but then you might be paying more in healthcare costs compared to another job where you might be paying less and the company's paying more. And you should really create an Excel and map it all out before you accept the offers.
I think that's a great idea. I think some listeners might find that overwhelming. Crystal, what advice do you have for somebody who's never done this before and is putting together that analysis and setting up that spreadsheet? What have you seen work for applicants that you've worked with?
That's a great question. I think that one thing that I've seen in my own community is that when someone's offered a salary that's maybe higher than what they were expecting, it's very exciting. And I think, my first recommendation is just to slow down and make sure that you do ask for that 24 to 72 hour grace period. And within that grace period, that's when I would ask for the total compensation package. So your company should be sending you maybe like a benefit guide that goes through, the health insurance cost and your 401k match and your accrual rates. And you've given yourself 24 or 72 hours to look through those things. So if you're new to kind of strategically negotiating a wage, I would say give yourself the 72 hours so you have time to create that Excel and really write down and sift through how much you truly are being paid with all of the fringe benefits.
Terrific. We're going to take a break, Crystal. Please stay with us. When we come back, Crystal Granger will continue to share her advice and her about how to respond to a salary offer. Stay with us. When was the last time you updated your resume? The experts at Top Resume can help. Go to maxlist.org/topresume. The professional writers at Top Resume will review your resume for free. Go to maxlist.org/topresume. Find out how you can update your resume on your own. or hire Top Resume to do it for you. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. Now, let's get back to the show. We're back at the Max List studio. I'm talking with Crystal Granger. She's the Total Rewards and Equity Manager at Bob's Red Mill. It's an employee-owned company that makes natural, certified organic, and gluten-free milled grain products. Crystal joins us from Portland, Oregon. Now, Crystal, before the break, you were sharing your tips and tricks for responding to a salary offer. And one point you made at the close of our conversation in the first segment is that you should take 24 to 72 hours to reflect on an offer. Do employers expect you to ask for that time, Crystal?
They do. Yeah, I don't think that any employer in 2023 expects to have an answer even by the end of the same day. So,
okay. So that gives you the time to do that analysis and talk to colleagues and perhaps mentors. Another tip that you mentioned in passing in the first segment was the importance of showing confidence when responding to a salary offer. Tell us more about that. Why is it important to be confident when you're talking to an employer about salary?
I think that confidence is really exuded through communication. And in a virtual world where we are all maybe accepting offers or interviewing via the computer or over the phone, the way you communicate and the words you choose to use really can set the tone for how the employer is going to interpret your excitement for the position. And if you can't be in person and show confidence through body language and eye contact, I think it's really important to be confident in how you are presenting especially when it comes time to negotiate that salary, especially for women who haven't had the luck of our culture to kind of, have that confidence instilled from early stages in our lives.
You mentioned the importance of using language that conveys confidence. What kinds of phrases, in your experience, Crystal, should a listener use to show confidence? What words can make a difference?
Absolutely. There is a great short video on LinkedIn Learning titled Communicating with Confidence. And I'm going to go ahead and use what I've learned from that video, but I highly recommend people watching it themselves. One of the tips that they share is to don't hedge a sentence by starting with things like I feel. Instead, try to say I expect or my research demonstrates, because women tend to already be looked at in society as people who are willing to kind of pass the baton for their feelings. And it's not true. It's in our language to say, I think, I feel more often than our counterparts. I also would recommend not to diminish your credibility. So to avoid preambles, like I'm not the expert, but, and instead really show that you are credible, by using sentences like, I am the expert in this space, and this is why I think we should go in this direction.
I love those tips. You also mentioned paying attention to body language. And as you mentioned as well, many conversations are happening virtually. Do you have tips for responding to a salary offer about how to use body language, whether it's in person or virtually, to show that confidence?
When you are far enough in the interview process, if you get that third call, I would assume that you know that you're going to be offered the position. And so I would recommend making sure that you're in an environment to take that call. And if it's in person, wonderful. Sitting at a table accepting an offer is a lot different than being able to stand and have your shoulders back and your head held high. So I'd recommend maybe trying to do that if possible in an in-person environment. Whereas if you're over the phone, and you might be working from home that day and you might be in more comfortable clothing, even standing up for that conversation totally changes like the way that you are going to channel that power and that confidence through that phone call. Obviously, you wouldn't want to be distracted during that time. And if you are feeling really giddy from the offer, you can always say like, I need a moment during that conversation, put yourself on mute, do your little happy dance, and then come back a little bit more, with a little bit less flusteredness and a little bit more confidence to continue that conversation.
What about in-person meetings, Crystal? They're still happening. What are your suggestions for body language that conveys confidence when you're responding to a salary offer?
Great question. I think if you are sitting across from somebody, mimicking their body language always helps. So you're not sitting there with your legs crossed or like your elbows on the table. Definitely mirror what your interviewee is doing, your interviewer is doing. I think that, again, if you could find yourself in a standing position when you get that, you're going to have more confidence because you're going to feel like you have more power because you're standing up. Even if that's, needing to excuse yourself for a glass of water, taking a moment in that process is going to settle you to be more confident going into the next step, which is strategically either asking for time to think about it or asking for more money or other fringe benefits that can increase your salary.
We've talked about the steps you should take when responding to a salary offer. Set a range, ask for time, do your analysis, pay attention to your body language, project confidence. What about mistakes, Crystal? What mistakes have you seen candidates make when responding to salary offers?
Well, I think the first mistake that people make is that they accept right away and they don't give themselves time to think about it, which employers expect you to think about it. It's a best practice to take time to think about it. And then they find themselves kind of lowballed from their colleagues when they actually enter into that work. So mistake number one, accepting right away. Even if you are offered a salary that's higher than you expected, you should still negotiate for something higher. It's expected and you can't lose because the base salary is already more than you expected. Even if it's just $1,000, even if it's just $2,000, like ask for more. Another mistake I think people make is that they don't look at the total compensation. So they get very excited about this one figure. But they don't think about, if you were previously working remotely, let's say in Washington, and you were making, $60,000 and you took a job where you were working in Oregon for $65,000. Great. That is a baseline salary increase. But now you're responsible for paying Oregon state taxes, which actually could reduce your salary to even under $60,000. So even things like that in this remote world that we find ourselves in, you've got to take the time to do your research to really see how that number that's been offered is going to show up in your net pay.
And I'm glad you brought up the point about asking for more. And even if you're only adding $1,000 or $2,000 to the initial offer, because when the salary you accept is going to affect your lifetime earnings, isn't it, Crystal?
Absolutely. And I think the other mistake I feel people make is that they're offered like a salary range or a salary that's less than what they need to survive, but they are so grateful for the opportunity. And in those cases, I would ask them to really try to consider asking that employer for a 3-month review, and to see if after 3 months, can I get an increase to maybe, the bottom part of this other salary range that I kind of need for my livelihood, or to ask for a sign-on bonus or something to help contribute. Because some employers can't do like an annual salary increase, but they could do a $3,000 or $5,000 sign-on bonus, especially in the tight job market that we find ourselves in today.
Terrific. It's been a great conversation, Crystal. Now tell us what's next for you.
Yeah. Well, working with the Portland Human Resource Management Association and being a co-director on the ED&I committee, I'm just really excited to continue that work. We, as an organization, we're always striving to make the HR profession and HR professionals more in tune with the world today. And there are so many changes in that space. Also sitting on the SHRM task force for better workplaces for a better world. Doing that work at a higher level brings me a lot of fulfillment. And I think this year for SHRM, you can expect some really great content to come out regarding kind of the shift to remote work.
Terrific. And for listeners who might not be familiar with the acronym, SHRM is the Society for Human Resources Management. It's a great organization, and I appreciate the work you're doing with them, Crystal. Now, I know also listeners can learn more about you by connecting with you on LinkedIn, and we'll be sure to include your LinkedIn URL in the show notes. And as always, if they do reach out to you, I hope they'll mention they heard you on Find Your Dream Job. Now, Crystal, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about the tips and tricks that you've shared today for responding to a salary offer?
If they could take away one thing from the conversation is next time they're offered a salary is to take the 24 to 72 hours to really reflect on it before accepting or declining.
Make sure you never miss an episode of Find Your Dream Job. Subscribe to our free podcast newsletter. You'll get information about our guests and transcripts of every show. Go to maxlist.org/newsletters. Again, that's maxlist.org/newsletters. Next week, our guest will be Soma Ghosh. She's a career advisor, a business owner, and the host of the Career Happiness Podcast. Soma helps women who are unhappy at work find career fulfillment, and she advises parents on how to show their teenagers better career options. Fear can take many forms when you look for work, and it can get the best of anybody, no matter how well qualified. Join us next Wednesday when Soma Ghosh and I talk about how to overcome your job search fears. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton Hopp schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislenberry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer is Matt Fiorillo. Ryan Morrison at Podfly Productions edits the show. Dawn Mole creates our transcripts. And our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week.